For a whole year now, we've been saying how the differences between ball pens and gel pens are starting to disappear and things are beginning to blur. Is this the perfect example of that middle ground? Stay tuned to find out more.
Hello and welcome back to Series 2 of Stationery Test Drive, the show where we take ordinary tools on an artistic spin. I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
I'm Samir.
And today we're looking at the Cello Butterflow ball pens.
As Samir said in the intro, the lines are blurring, but this one is actually a pretty sharp ball pen. I'll demonstrate here. The Cello Butterflow, it does flow. I'm barely putting any pressure on it. In fact, like the lightest line I can get is pretty much with no pressure. It's a very, very fine line. We'll try to zoom in on this as best as we can. And yeah, we have had a weird debate where is this a ball pen? Is this a gel pen? Cello says that it's a ball pen. But we think it behaves like a gel pen. And is that even a distinction anymore?
I think it is becoming more and more difficult to tell them apart. Having now studied the nib of this one much closer, literally 5 minutes ago, yes, it definitely seems to work more like a ball pen.
Only the freshest research for our wonderful viewers.
But we work on the pieces that we do a little bit in advance. So when I was actually working on the artwork that you will see in a while, I was quite convinced throughout the working on that piece that this was a gel pen. I did not feel at any point that this was a ball pen.
See now, and I'll try to zoom in here. This is what I would say is indicative of a ball pen. This little balling here. It's not to do with, or rather it is a byproduct of the ball point. But
it's actually a byproduct of the kind of ink because gel pens have balls in the mechanism too. It's not.
So it's the ink that sort of accumulates a little, and then after a while of doing maybe a thin line, you put one down and you get that bit of balling. And depending on how, let's say, pedantic you are, sometimes that can be extremely annoying. It was extremely annoying when we did the Pentels, which we must bring up because we did not like those, as handsome as they were to look at. Looks aren't everything, folks. Sometimes you have to perform. But the Cello Butterflow simply ball performs well. I do like it. Yes, you're like the more I'm using it today, the more I'm thinking, oh, it's a ball pen. But like you, I also
did not think that the first time I used it.
Yeah, maybe it's just something to do with the weather because obviously these are flow dynamics and things like that. But that aside, the Cello company is one of the largest Indian or worldwide manufacturers of plastic things, right? Everything from buckets to ball pens.
Yes, buckets to ball pens is a good way to put it. They started in 1982 as a plastics company. They started making what's essentially, I guess, some sort of Tupperware.
They started with thermoware, which is basically the hot, casseroles.
Casseroles and flasks and things like that.
So they had a good decade of doing that. By 1994, so literally more than 10 years later, they got into molded plastic furniture. All those cheap chairs that we like to throw around at events. And the very next year, they made their first pen using nibs and mechanisms that were imported, but just molding the body of the pen itself. It's a very interesting journey for a stationery company.
Now, Cello, the Cello writing division, claims that they sell over 5 million pens every day.
Every day?
That is a lot.
So in India, they're basically, I think no particular brand has a monopoly, but this would be close to.
Yeah, I think 5 million pens a day would be fairly high up there, even in India.
So what do they manufacture if they sell 5 million pens?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And this is cheap, right? This is one of the best-selling pens in India. And how much is this?
So you get a pack of 10 for 100 Indian rupees.
So that's
this is quite
like
cheap.
$1.20 or $1.10
For 10 of
For
them.
10 for 10 of
them.
these.
Yeah,
So it's
and
like 10 or 15 cents.
and
per.
this is a full cartridge here, or refill, or whatever you call it, in ball pens. I've barely used less than a thumbnail's worth of it on a pretty decent drawing, and maybe we should get into our drawings.
Yes, we should.
Why don't you go first, Minjal, since you have most colorful center stage. See, now that is just I don't know. I almost like to think of it as musical. Why don't you tell us about this one?
So ball pens actually, they're not they're I'm not really used to creating art with ball pens. Like majority people out there, I use them for writing. So when it comes to creating art pieces, I'm always a little confused about what to do. And these pens are like so smooth. I was just, I sat with a ruler and I was just drawing lines, and I thought that's what I'll do for this piece. And from all the ball pens that we've used, this one actually doesn't really smudge that much. And wherever it was balling, I very like Vishal says it very often. It's not a bug; it's a feature.
Yes.
So I actually used it, in that way. Wherever it was balling, I've made the balls or the dots. And this is really, for the price. It's a great ball pen, not just for writing but even for art.
Yes, I mean, our tagline for this show is ordinary tools, but we don't always do that. But I think one of the ethos of this show is certainly how much you can do with ordinary tools, and this is the most ubiquitous, simple thing. If you ever thought, I can't get into art because it's too expensive, this is a mass market pen that you can make art with. You can just buy a set of them. You can buy a few hundred sheets of paper for around the same price.
Yeah.
And you're good to go in your artistic journey.
And also the Butterflow is available in like a red, blue and black color.
Okay.
This has a 0.7 mm tip, and the rubber grip, and
let's talk about the sort of, because we talked about this with the Pentel that we so disliked as being a great feeling pen. This is much cheaper, much less.
And this felt great too.
This felt great too. This rubberized,
they call
wavy,
it the Elasto grip.
The Elasto grip is lovely. You don't expect it on a pen of this.
It actually reminded me a lot of the. What were the ball pens we used with the multiple colors? The Inkjoy, yes.
Our favorite ones.
That had a similar sort of textured grip, but I think this one's a little better. It feels softer.
Yeah, as a grip, it's nice to. You never have to. A lot of grips I find there is a sort of specific sweet spot where you need to go. Whereas this one, you can, if you're one of those close users, or if you're one of the people who hold back here or in between,
And for something that has a fairly slim profile, it's surprisingly comfortable to hold.
Yeah, usually these ones for people with at least our hand sizes, you don't always get a good, long-term use out of it, but they're good. I used mine for, continuing a tradition here on Test Drive where I try to do like comics with pretty much everything. This is mine. It's all Butterflow. With a bit of an underdrawing, of course, initially, but it was so surprising how much you can get out of the same pen. Now, even if I looked at this, I would probably, if you told me, oh, I use 3 different types of gauges of fine liner or something, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But no, this is one very cheap fountain pen for everything from as simple as the boxes to the texture to the little build up of patterns and things like that, and the writing. I did this so that I could because I usually do illustrated works. I wanted to try some kind of writing because this is the workhorse of literally 5 million people a day. And most of those people are not artists, they're using it for writing. So I kind of wanted to see what you can get out of it in a sort of artistic writing way.
And to just correct you, Vishal said one single fountain pen, but
Ah,
I
not
think that's
fountain pen.
indicative of the fact that he's done comics like this with a fountain pen, and this is as smooth as those.
Yeah, see, I didn't catch that, but yes, it's true. This is as nice to use a sort of liquid line butter flow, some kind of fat and some kind of flow.
I think one of the other ball pens that we really liked reviewing were the BiCs.
Yes, absolutely.
And what we have to also mention is that BiC acquired a 100% stake in Cello
Yes.
in 2015.
So the buckets and all, or just the pens?
Just
Choose the,
pens.
choose the
Okay.
writing division.
Okay.
And it's not surprising because BiC is a great company for
Yeah.
them to have had trust.
Yeah.
To acquire 100% stake in a brand and give it their name, because these are now it's called the BiC Cello, the company.
Right, and just like to go into a bit of a personal story, I was not aware of Cello specifically, let's say about a decade ago. I think someone gave me one of these pens exactly, the Butterflow.
Yeah. And we're not saying gave you as in a gift. This is just
No,
like one of
like,
those, oh, here, use a pen. because
Yeah,
you
like
written-
someone who gave me a pen to use, and they said, okay, hang on to it or whatever. And that stayed in my pocket because I carry a pen and a little notebook in my pocket. That one stayed in my pocket for over 5 years and continued to work. The entire body was cracked and whatnot because it's in your pocket with spare change and keys, but the pen continued to work, and this was probably before BiC took over. So I'm guessing Cello was good enough even before BiC
Yeah.
took over.
I mean, they were good enough for BiC to
take
acquire
over.
them. So, but why don't you show us what your test drive is, and we can round out our set.
So I went for a completely illustrative piece, and again, as I was working on this, I'm trying to look now, and I really can't see any balling on this entire piece, other than maybe a little here, which is why when I was using it, I just did not think that it was a ball pen. I very much thought that I was using a blue gel pen, and that's the way I treated it, and it worked fine.
Again, the variety of line quality, you've got little like feathered lines and these nice lean clear thick ones, or even something like this, which you get that impression, at least I do, that there's water here, or those tiles are wet rather than these tiles which are dry. It's such a great range for just having something at hand. It's like the nimble point and shoot cameras that people are getting back into these days, because they realize, it's good enough to make artistic things with.
Yes, and sometimes you want something that you don't need to take care of too much, something that you don't need to worry about the inks too much, the refills too much, the cleaning too much. This is as worry-free an instrument as you can get.
No, I think we clearly need to, look into their portfolio and test a few more products.
Including the buckets?
Maybe. What we'll do is, test some of their fountain pens as well. They
That would be
have
nice.
they have marker pens, fountain pens. So maybe in the upcoming episodes we also get there.
Yeah.
The one thing that I realized is that all of us did these artworks maybe about a week or 10 days ago,
Yeah.
and our weather has changed drastically in those 10 days.
Well, we're in Bombay, we're in Mumbai, it's sort of coastal and humid and...
For a tropical place, where even in winter we are used to temperatures in the late 20s and early 30s.
Yeah,
But
centigrade.
this last week we've had temperatures that are in the low 20s and even in the late teens centigrade. I'm guessing that's why this feels right now more like a ball pen than it did
Yeah.
when I actually drew this.
Yeah, you have to wonder, and if there is someone who is like an ink engineer or chemist in the audience, please illuminate us, because I'm guessing that these formulations are made based on the weather of the place that you're, when they're making 5 million a day, they probably know that most of the time it's going to be hot and humid, and therefore it needs to kind of work in that weather.
There has to be an ideal use temperature, I guess, or a range.
Well,
So as much as we like, expensive, products, what we need to also always keep in mind, like we keep saying on the show, is that really sometimes things that are available in your local stationery stores are objects that you should not really just ignore and maybe try them out.
And to, like you said, I agree. To add to that, this is not just something you need to go to a stationery store for. In India, you can have any kind of corner shop, chemist, or we have pan here, which is like a digestive snack. You have a pan wala, a little shop
Like
that's
a little shop that sells cigarettes or whatever.
yeah, that kind of thing. And you will find like a roll of these or a pack of these
Yeah.
with over there, and I'd say it's well worth getting this. It's well worth getting a pack. It's well worth getting just some plain paper or even good paper, because it can take. This is a decent cartridge paper. This is not copy paper.
The one thing that we all did was mostly stick to kind of clean line art. Now that I've late realized that this is actually a very nice blue ball pen, I really should try some properly shaded ball pen portraits with this at some point.
Yeah, I was starting to get there, but like you said, yes, now I want to push that more. I want to see what the range of it is, because that's one of the fun things about ball pens.
About ball pens, you can actually do shading with them, which you can't with gel pens.
Well, that is the BiC Cello Butterflow Simply Ball. It's a ball pen, not a gel pen. And you know what? Maybe it's time that doesn't matter anymore. Ball pens were kind of the iPhones of their time. We've talked about this long ago, all the way back to our second episode of our first series. There are 53 episodes of that you can watch. And yeah, the ball pens, and then in the 70s, I think there were gel pens, which were like this new thing. And,
Yes.
and then fine liners kind of came around, and there are all these wonderful things that have really made so that millions of people, literally every day, can just use a pen to write things. But if you are like us, artists, calligraphers, designers, people who don't quite fit into the mold of things, that doesn't mean you can't just go out and get the most standard, ubiquitous, normal, quote unquote, pen out there, and you can have a great time with it. This is going into my repertoire, just like some of the other cheap ones that we've been using. I love the line quality. Definitely going to use it more for comics. Definitely you are going to use it for not just lean clear drawings like this, but shaded ones as well. Minjal, are you getting into abstract musical art? And if I run this through some kind of computer parser, is it going to give me a message?
We probably just dunk it in the cello bucket the next time.
Wow, so that's installation art.
Yes, I will use it for more writing, like you
Yes.
did. That's what I usually do.
Because
so-
if you're new to this show, yes, we are sort of multi faceted in our artistic expression, but Minjal has great experience in calligraphy and things like that. Samir and I are more graphic designer, illustrator, animator, near do wells, and we will near do well next time. That was a segue. We're a bit rusty, folks. It's a new series, but we're back this year with a different schedule every other week this year. Which if you're catching up with us on a playlist, that doesn't matter. But yeah, every other Tuesday, Stationery Test Drive. We have other things planned
For the weeks in between.
for the weeks in between.
Stay tuned for those.
Yeah, and until next time, I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
I'm Samir. And if you liked this video on a very, very cheap and simple ball pen, you really should look at our video on the Inkjoy, which we mentioned. That was a good one. And another cheap and great ball pen was our 4-in-1 Hauser ball pens, which we made some really beautiful 4-color art with. Check those out.
When in doubt, simply ball.